Hold this to 20 minutes, hopefully, and then we'll have some questions and answers. Time runs after that. And I guess we can start the first slide to put us in the theme. This is to kind of put us in the spirit of the moment. Go to the next slide. There you are. Okay. I think we only have the royalty payment for about 12 seconds, so we may have violated it. Incidentally, for those of you, this is the book that's out for sale, and there's still a few left. I'd be happy to autograph it because we have such a huge print overrun. We'd like to get rid of them all. And it's actually pretty good, I must say. I wrote half of it, and the constitutional attorney wrote the other half. We've been talking about libertarianism and obviously the way of thinking about life. And the internet really has the potential of being this marvelous libertarian, individual-oriented facility. Although it was invented by the U.S. Defense Department, by DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, back in the 1970s to be able to survive nuclear attacks by having every packet run everywhere else and nobody could control it. We've come a long way since then because, of course, everything I'm talking about is public domain information. We have a scenario where literally Big Brother knows who, where, what, how, and now why we are searching the internet. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about Big Brother and all the information that's appearing in the papers today. There's another article today. If you read The Guardian, The New York Times, German papers, The Independent, and it seems to be out of control. But in fact, this has gone back to the early 1952 when the then secret UK-US treaty created a massive international system of basically electronic monitoring and spying, focused on NSA in the States and GCHQ in the UK, and then the Canadians, the people in Australia, etc. In New Zealand, but there's a pattern here. So we just have to assume, obviously, that everything is being monitored, and it is on the internet, everything that you do. This is a slide courtesy of the Washington Post. This is the latest of the several hundred different programs running at the National Security Administration or Agency, where they monitor Microsoft, Google, Yahoo, Facebook, YouTube, Skype, AOL, Apple, etc. And they monitor everything: email, chats, videos, so forth, photos, anything you list and post. In fact, there we go. The process has been going on for some time in the latest generation. Microsoft plugged into the NSA system back in 2007, Apple recently at the end of 2012. And that means that any information on their servers is immediately available to law enforcement, security, and again, because of the goal of trying to look out for international terrorists and international terrorism. And I think that there's a certain philosophy certainly in the United States federal government that they want to know about everything so they can sort through the mounds of documents to find the few items. I would personally think that that's inappropriate for a variety of reasons, but more importantly, it's just ineffective. However, that's the way it is, and therefore you just have to assume from the standpoint of the government, anything you do on the internet is going to be monitored, and even if you heavily encrypt, all that does is delay the process. Maybe it costs $10 million in 6 months to get the information, but it can be done. So what I'm going to talk about instead is perhaps something that's far more, in some ways, insidious, and that is the absolute process of converting free lunches, quote, quote, as in there is no such thing as, to monetize the information that you're inadvertently giving to all of the organizations on the internet that you use. The reality is, of course, that everything that you do on the internet is essentially tracked. Your email, your chat, your videos, your photos, not just by the government, but more importantly, by the organizations themselves. I'm sure when you signed up for Gmail, you did read the 12th page. You did download the authorization you gave them. Yes, yes, of course. I have done that, by the way, for many of them. And I'm always amazed about the absolute agreement that we voluntarily given away in a contractual agreement. We get something, quote, free, and we give away something else that's worthless, namely all of our privacy. So we're going to talk about 9 tips to claw back these things from the internet, to claw back your privacy, plus I have another 6 or so more. So the first number one of all is don't use Google. Google tracks everything. From the day that they started their first server in the 1960s, any Google search you have done is recorded. Where you went, what your IP address is, which reveals who you are, where you're located, etc. That information makes... Yes, Google is our friend. Remember, the phrase is don't do evil if you're Google. And that's because the hidden phrase is do really. No, never. Don't want to complete that. So instead, use, for Google searches, use something else. DuckDuckGo is great. And also Start Page. I particularly like Start Page, startpage.com. This is a company based in the Netherlands. When you go to Start Page, it's free. They also have commercial service, so they can underwrite it. And Start Page does not record your IP address, does not keep logs, encrypts the communications channel to them, and then they go off and they send the inquiry to Google. It comes back instantly, and it's displayed on your browser as if you're going to Google, except you haven't. And that's a tremendous advantage in terms of maintaining privacy. So DuckDuckGo is the second one. They're based in the States, in California. And again, the same thing, another great organization. Not only do they use Google, they also look at 6 or 7 other search engines simultaneously. And so there's 2 slightly different services. They're both wonderful to use. So whenever I say Google it, from now on in your mind think Start Page it. The next item, tip number 2, is use Firefox to browse. Whatever you do, don't use Chrome. That's another Google product. And needless to say, when you're using Chrome, your privacy is compromised. The information is sent back to Google, and they use it and their subsidiaries to make your browsing experience friendlier. That is to say, once they know what you want to see, they'll kind of direct you to those things if they can, rather than to allow you to make your own free choices. And for most people that works, because most people tend to be very happy with the selections that Google tends to recommend to them. So if you want to ultimately maintain a private browsing experience, you should use Tor, T-O-R. And you can get Tor from the Electronic Frontier Foundation, a wonderful San Francisco-based libertarian organization which specializes in maintaining internet privacy. And they provide this free service called Tor, which loads onto your computer. You just download it, click it, instantly installs. It encrypts everything, and then they run a special version of the Firefox browser, which I'll talk about later, but basically it doesn't reveal lots of information, and it provides secure services. Now, Tor was originally started, by the way, by the grant from the U.S. Navy, but developed by people in MIT. And they developed the service so that the people who were in the military outside the United States could successfully go back to the U.S. and talk with their loved ones or do other searching or whatever and not be concerned about people listening in. It's used heavily by law enforcement. It's used heavily by media. It's used heavily by dissidents in China and hundreds of other countries. It's a free service, and I can't recommend it highly enough. So the winner is torproject.com. Or you can go to EFF.org for more information about Tor. It's what you call a VPN, a virtual private network. The next item, of course, tip number 3 is basically use email services which are encrypted. And you want to use email in which the email itself is encrypted when you send it to or from your computer to their computer. And then you want to have it encrypted on the server, and you want to make sure that this encrypted system cannot be easily accessed by other organizations. If you use Gmail, for example, Gmail not only reads your email, but depending on who you are, they ship the contents of your email off to other organizations. So if you say in your email, gosh, I really like that new Ford Focus that's available, and the next time you log on to Gmail, suddenly there are all these ads for Fords and Ford dealers and how to buy Fords. Isn't that interesting? And if you say other nasty words, there are 250 or more on the list of interesting words that various agencies want to know about, well, then they ship it off to other people. So you probably don't think about email as being a postcard, but that's effectively what it is. You're dropping something in the mail, and it's being sent post office to post office, and anybody along the line can and does read it, and then makes copies of it and saves it. So you want to use encrypted email if possible, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. There are a number of services that are offering encrypted email, and some of them are quite expensive. Corporate encrypted email might be $1,000 per email account per year, but there are some services that are on the order of about $30, $40 a year, which give you high security. Now the other next tip is try alternative services for the kinds of services you use. For example, Skype, on that first chart I showed you, has been completely compromised, and lots of any Skype call that you make is not secure. So you can use a free a version of Skype which does encrypt the audio and video. It's called Jitsi, Jitsi. You can go to jitsi.org and do your chatting through Jitsi. It is just like Skype, only encrypted and secure. It's what Skype would have been or used to be when it first started. Video chatting, there are other options, video viewing, file storage. Let's just look at some of them. So for chatting, we also have some other examples. Video chatting, there's Goober. Video viewing, instead of using and uploading files to YouTube, which of course is also a subsidiary of Google. So anytime that you look at a YouTube file, it's recorded. That information is recorded by Google and is available for sale to the Google customer base of advertisers. And then if you want to store a file on a server somewhere that's not your own, you want to use Tresorted, which is an interesting encrypted service for keeping your files safe. Tip number 5 is be antisocial. This, of course, comes naturally to libertarians, but unlike all the progressives who want to share everything in their whole lives with everyone, that reminds me of the classic phrase, well, if you have nothing to hide, why do you care about loss of privacy? And my retort to that is, well, I mean, that's probably what the KGB and the Gestapo used to say. But more importantly, when you get into an elevator or a lift for our English friends on the first floor to talk to someone, and you go up and you're talking to them in the elevator, and the elevator goes up to the second floor, and other people come in, and what do? You stop talking, and you wait until they leave. Well, those are perfect strangers. Why do they care? So the answer is, I don't think it's anybody's business, period. Yeah, you have a right to an inalienable right, as they would say in the U.S., to privacy. So the problem is any kind of social intercourse, particularly with Facebook, is particularly nasty. There is a program called suicidemachine.org which will delete all of your materials. There are actually people out there saying, you don't want to be in Facebook anymore? Download our software. And then, of course, you have to trust that it's going to do that, but these are good vetted programs. Next tip, you know, every smartphone you have is, in fact, a spy phone, masquerading to be a smartphone. Smartphones track you completely, and in many ways, if you have an Apple phone or any of the modern smartphones, the GPS system records every picture that you take, unless you've turned it off. So lots of people have discovered to their horror that they take pictures of their children, and the latitude and longitude and altitude, because smartphones know how high it is as well, are then encoded into the picture header. Anybody can look at that. And then they put them up on Facebook or whatever. And so some child molester has easy pickings. They can find out where the child lives, what bedroom they're in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's because people don't know that this service is turned on as a feature. And you have to turn it off yourself. And that's just one of dozens and dozens of services that that smartphones tend to automatically provide you. For example, there are apps which are installed in smartphones, and roughly half the apps don't encrypt anything, so when they're transmitted, it's public information. Half of them provide hidden tracking locations. They spy on where you are. Apple, back in 2011, said that it would turn off the ability to track people without their knowing it, and it provided this recommendation to apps. And it still hasn't happened for the apps in most cases. Tip number 7 is turn off Wi-Fi when you're wandering around in the streets. Because Wi-Fi, when you walk by, if you're using a smartphone with a cell phone access, well, then use it in cell phone mode and turn off the Wi-Fi until you want to use it. You walk past a Wi-Fi point, it triggers all of the phone responses in the area, and immediately you're tracked. And you know, oh, there's phone number so-and-so that's at that location and that point. So in England, in London, several weeks ago, I was reading in the paper that as an experiment, they're privately installing, again, it's nothing to do with governments, privately installing Wi-Fi detectors in trash cans throughout England, throughout London, so that when you walk by the trash can, the Wi-Fi point says, aha, you have just walked by this trash can, even if you've turned off your GPS tracking, and then they send that back to some database, and then maybe the next store you get to, there's a little delivery information on your cell phone that says, for you only, special deal, 10% off if you go into this store right now and buy those set of hiking boots, or whatever, right? If you have to, of course, use Wi-Fi in unprotected internet, like at, say, a Starbucks or equivalent, you want to use a VPN, a virtual private network, again, whenever you log into the internet, especially when you read your email, because it's probably likely that the person next to you, or maybe the person down the street, has got one of those free programs you can download, load in your computer, and listen in and track everybody else's computers that aren't encrypted operating in the free Wi-Fi area. So tip number 8 then is encrypt, encrypt, encrypt. Encrypt everything on your hard drives. There's a free program, marvelous, called TrueCrypt, TrueCrypt.org. Encrypt all of the services as much as you can with impossible to crack passwords. There are a lot of information on how to do that. And then, of course, nothing is entirely secure, because a smart enough hacker who really wants to access your email will probably be able to do so, given enough time and money. Tip number 9, use virtual private networks such as Tor. So a virtual private network means that you log into their system. Many of them are free. Some of them are faster ones, of course, are subscription oriented. Pay $50 to $100 a year for the paid ones. Tor is free. And you pop out from their network in another part of the world with another IP address, and everything between your computer and that distant computer is secure, and that distant computer doesn't reveal who you are. So that's a popular way to surf the internet. Now here are a few more in summary, a few more tips. You know, when you go to a DNS server, it's probably your settings in your computer probably set up so your DNS server automatically defaults to your local internet provider. Or if you're smart, you'll use, say, something like 8.8.8.8, which is Google, except that doesn't work. So it turns out that there is an organization, OpenDNS.org, OPENDNS.org, that has developed last year an encrypted DNS service. And you say, well, wait a minute, why do I care? Well, when you type in the name of a site you want to go to in a browser, the internet doesn't know what that is. Internet numbers are 2.3.6.19, right? They're not names. People like names. So how does the system work? Well, your browser first interrogates, goes to a local DNS server, and says, hi, I'm trying to look up oxford.ac.uk. Right. The DNS server looks it up from his table and says, that's really 207.196.3. That was unencrypted. You just sent that stream open as a postcard. Your ISP knows it. They record it. Some of them keep it forever. Anybody along the line knows it and records it. So you can go to OpenDNS and you download the DNS crypt, and it'll automatically go to their service encrypted. They don't keep records. And that's just another way of lowering, you know, it's none of anybody else's business what you're surfing. And then you can use Linux and not Windows or iOS. That's critical, of course. In 1998, there was a Canadian programmer who was meandering through the countless downloads that Microsoft constantly does to patch their operating system every week. You know, it could be every 20 minutes now for all I know, but then it was once a month or so, and he looked at a download and he discovered that they didn't strip off the programmer's comments, which are in English. And he, my God, that's like a mortal sin that you cannot recover from it. This reveals all the secret information of what every line of code does to your competitors. So he goes over to the crypto module, and the crypto module is the module in your computer that says, when Microsoft says, I'm God, I'm root server, unlock, I'm going to take over your operating system and fix it and patch it and turn it into a next improved and make it all safe. Well, there are two keys in that crypto server. They're normally called crypto key 1 and crypto key 2, and he was looking at the comment line and he said, that's interesting. The first key is called company key. The second key is called NSA key. Wonder what that means. Well, it's obvious what that means. To get permission to export this highly encrypted technology, both Apple and Windows had to provide backdoors into every machine, which means that any time that government wants to, it can download, turn on your camera, turn on your microphone, do keystroke captures, send the material back when you're using these operating systems that have been approved for export with highly encrypted information in them under the U.S. Commerce Department's control. These highly encrypted systems come under the so-called Munitions Act, and they're considered under the same rules and regulations as shipping off bazookas or worse. So Linux is an open source system. It doesn't do that. There aren't any back holes, so I would recommend, you know, using Linux if one wants to. Then it gets even more interesting. It turns out that just because your browser doesn't have a serial number and doesn't reveal who you are, and you've now gone through a virtual private network and hidden everything, your browser is different from my browser, and that's different from everybody else's browser. And how to prove that is go to panopticlick.eff.org, and they will tell you, out of the millions of browsers that they've looked at, how unique your browser is compared with everybody else's. Now, of course, to be anonymous, you want your browser to look like everybody else's, right? So you'd like your browser to look, if there are 100 million browsers operating, you'd like yours to be, every other one would be just like yours. You'd be a needle in a haystack. However, typically your browser will reveal that you're 1 in 10 million, 1 in 15 million, 1 in 20 million. And based on the operating system, the time of day that you call in, the time of settings, the language you're using, what software you're running, etc., you're unique. And it's not hard to track you. And lots of these websites subscribe to third-party companies, there are 3 of them, which then transfer the data automatically. So if you log into Amazon, for example, or maybe others besides Amazon, and they're part of these private corporate systems, they will capture the information, and then when you log on to another website, they will share the information instantly. And so you have a database built up across multiple websites, and if you logged into one of those sites with an email address, that's also associated. So you have literally hundreds of pages worth of information based on the browser you use. Now, what's nice about using Tor is Tor loads its own browser into your. It starts and launches it automatically on your computer. It's a version of Firefox. It's a plain, simple browser. It turns off things like Flash. You never want to run Flash. It reveals lots of stuff. As an aside, by the way, you probably don't want to run Adobe's PDF program, the Adobe Reader, anymore. I just found this out a few weeks ago. Every time apparently you log into, you open an Adobe file, the Adobe Reader reports back to Adobe the file you opened and who wrote it and what computer it's on and the time of day and the location, the IP. Pretty nice. So you can use a freebie system like Nitro, N-I-T-R-O, nitro.org, I think, and that you can replace that. I would install a firewall like Zone Alarm or Komodo. They're both free. And firewalls are important because they obviously block unexpected outputs going in and out. Before I loaded, I was just running programs on my computer, and not doing anything. Something like 25 programs were open, running, communicating. So, my God, what are they doing? They're all waiting for updates. They're all saying information. And, you know, with these firewalls, you can shut them down. You can turn off things that are unimportant. I would go to grc.com. They check firewall leaks. That's marvelous. That's a guy by the name of Gibson, developed a computer programming company for 25 years. Free services. Tens of millions of computers have gone to it. and he tests your computer for you and tells you whether it's secure or not in terms of ports. And the last thing, of course, if you're really ultra paranoid about privacy, use the post office. Mail it. You know, there is this thing called the post office. It still exists. They're lovely people. They love to see you. It's a very physical interaction. You can get this little sticky thing. You can put it on your tongue in some countries, lick it, and reconnect with the horsey population. Put it on an envelope. Off it goes, and it's much safer. So having said that, there are lots of smartphones, of course, in this room, all of which are actively reporting on all of this. We should say just, you know, be happy and try to minimize, obviously, what's out there waiting to bite at you. And there are lots of ways of doing it. Thank you very much.